All right, we've got everybody here. I think we can commence the meeting. Welcome everybody to the Board of Health meeting, special meeting. Please we'll take a roll call here, see if everybody's here. Who's here?
Dr. Mark Akers.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnie Boroff is excused. Mr. Edward Loxton.
Here.
Mr. Scott Lyons is excused. Mrs. Mackenzie Posey.
Here.
Mrs. Natasha Vitt.
Here.
Mr. Robert Watson.
Here.
Dr. Zachary West.
Here.
Dr. Clay Wolf.
Here.
All right, thank you everybody. With that, let's join me in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, the first action item on the agenda, hopefully we can get through this quickly. I wanted to go back to the December 15th meeting to make sure that we review and correct any procedural errors in the way things were done. That's why I put these two items on the agenda. So the first one has to do with the motion to rescind resolution 2022.19 concerning the Health Commissioner's participation on the AOHC, which is a Association of Ohio Health Commissioners Board. So that's the first one there. Is there any discussion on that one?
I would actually like to have that motion totally rescinded. I withdraw my request.
Can you delve into that further?
I'll do it on my own time.
Any other discussion?
So my understanding is you're going to voluntarily withdraw from participation for the request of the 2022-2019.
Can we pull the mics closer?
Talk to the microphones, please. Everybody use them.
So my understanding is you're going to withdraw the initial proposal for the 2022-2019.
Yes.
We're gonna do it on our own. So then.
Okay, any other discussion? Do I have a motion?
We have to motion for her withdrawal.
Well, you have to.
Do you wanna make a motion to do
The resolution
anything?
is in place. You'd have to make a motion to
Yeah,
rescind
the resolution is still in place. Is there a motion concerning this? To rescind 2022.19?
Doesn't it kind of die if she's not doing it?
No, you're going to.
No, we already passed it, so we have to do something.
To end
To
it.
end
So
it.
I'll make the motion to rescind resolution 2022-2019.
I will second that.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Okay, call the vote here then on that.
Dr. Akers,
Yes.
Mr. Loxton,
Yes.
Mrs. Posey,
Yes.
Mrs. Vitt,
Yes.
Mr. Watson,
Yes.
Dr. West,
Yes.
Dr. Wolf.
Yes.
Thank you. So that resolution is rescinded. Thank you. Got that done. The next item has to do with the election of the board, president and vice president. I thought that Scott would be here. He's the vice president currently, and I thought we'd give him a chance to speak and give an opinion. I think that we did things with a motion and a second and a vote, but afterwards it seemed that people were confused as far as what we were allowed to do, how we could make motions, how that all happened. So I wanted to make sure to go back and discuss if there was anybody feels they need to change things or make another motion, revise something concerning that action.
I would like to make a nomination. I'd like to nominate Dr. Clay Wolf
President?
For-
president
Okay.
I'll second that.
and Dr. West for vice president.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay. Take a call, roll call. I'm sorry. Yeah. So we have a motion for President Dr. Clay Wolf, Vice President Dr. Zach West.
Do you need to close a motion to close the nominations?
I'm not sure we have a first and a second. I think you have to vote on that motion, is my understanding.
Okay.
Any disagreement? Any further
Other
discussion?
nominations?
Any other nominations? Yeah, any other discussion? Okay, we got a motion and a second.
Or I guess not, like, all
Oh, yeah, I'm just asking, I'm just saying,
No,
is
I
there
just,
any other
know what
motion?
you
I
get
think
like
they need to
names
be-
next time, so I was just asking.
Yeah. This would be a
Okay.
roll call. Yeah, so we've got the first and the second on there, so I guess we take the roll call.
Dr. Akers?
Yes.
Mr. Longston?
Yes.
Mrs. Posey?
Yes.
Mrs. Witt?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Mr. West? Dr. West?
Yes.
Dr. Wolf?
Yes.
Passed, motion passed. Thank you. I'll make sure that everybody understood the process.
Thank you.
That was pretty expeditious. So at this time now, I'm going to open it up for public comments concerning Sunny Farms. And I'd like everybody to be respectful of everybody else so we all get to talk. Try to limit yourself to 3 minutes.
Do we have a sign-in sheet?
There is a sign-in sheet up here for everyone who wanted to talk.
Are we gonna limit total comments to?
I'd like to limit the overall time to 30 minutes, but I don't know that's going to be an issue. It depends on how many people want to keep talking. So I don't really want to stop anything, but I want to make sure that we try to be reasonable about it at the same time. So. These people want to speak.
Mr.
Okay.
President, if I may, before we enter into comments, public comments, I'd like to acknowledge a receipt to the board.
Okay.
Letters from Ashley Reinhardt and Lynn McAllister. I think they were mailed to all the board members. I just want to make sure that everyone here received those comments
Yeah.
as well.
I did. Yeah. Keep noting that, I appreciate it. On the sign-in sheet, though, the first person up here, I'm just going to go down in the order that we're signed in here, please. And so the first person is Brian Easy, please.
Thank you. I'm Brian Ezek, Vice President of Operations for Wind Waste Innovations. Since acquiring the Sunny Farms landfill, Wind Waste has collaborated with the Ohio EPA and the Seneca County General Health District to adhere to some of the most strict requirements for any landfill in Ohio. Wind has instituted a plethora of safeguards and precautions at Sunny Farms since the 2019 consent order that already exceed those required at other landfills in Ohio. In this extensive regulatory environment with constant scrutiny, Sunny Farms has demonstrated superior performance. This fact is supported by a November 23rd email from Mike Reiser of the Ohio EPA to the Board of Health that stated that Sunny Farms is in substantial compliance. And the board's own consultant with the May 27th board meeting stated, we agree that they have complied with the consent order and the license reporting requirements that occurred over the last 3 years. The conditions that are being considered are duplicative of the existing regulations already set forth in the Ohio EPA standards, and these cover all facets of the landfill operation. What's more, those regulations subject Sunny Farms to 12 various permits and 13 associated plans that include over 1,100 various conditions on the facility's operation. There is no need for additional license conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next person, Susan Platt.
Hello, my name is Susan Platt. I'm from Loudon Township. You probably have seen me here before.
Susan, can you talk in the mic so that
Yes.
people can hear? Sure, thank you. Thank you.
I'm representing the Rat Patrol Residents Against Trash here in Loudon Township, and I would like to remind the board of several important reasons to deny the permit. The landfill just denied all 3 reasonable and lawful conditions, and those were the following. Follow the consent order and report back to the health department. Number 2, add some precautionary measures to protect the public. And number 3, monitor at least once per every 50 train cars for things that shouldn't be allowed into the landfill. The latest testing isn't back yet, so this vote can't be made with any confidence. It is our understanding that additional testing of surrounding soil and water was prohibited, which also seems illegal and suspicious. They are still in violation of the Clean Air Act, and substantial compliance should only be acceptable for short term, not 15 years. New York is sending shredded materials that could be literally anything without any daily oversight for prevention of hazardous waste in rail cars. The rail cars leak across numerous states and risk contamination of our soil and water. Soon Brookhaven, New York will be sending 2,000 more tons daily of their industrial waste to us that cause cancer in their own town. Approval of a permit is a green light for expansion, and our community cannot shoulder any further burden. We should be working towards waste reduction, not encouraging more. Self-monitoring and visual inspections are not adequate for rail car oversight. We need to preserve land for our own waste. If expansion requests keep coming years before they were estimated, it indicates that someone isn't accurately reporting the tonnage again. The SO2 meters still are not placed in the proper place to get adequate readings. And our last point, there's still no plan in place for evacuation and safety for the fires that occur every year. The rail cars should be inspected if they catch on fire and not by Sunny Farms to determine the contents of the rail cars. We feel that Seneca County deserves better. Thank you.
Next person, Joey Walters.
Joey Walters, I'm a resident of Astoria. I was able to watch the last health board meeting on Zoom, and so this is in response to that meeting, but it definitely pertains to what's going on here tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to express myself concerning the Sunny Farm landfill operating license renewal request. As a concerned citizen who pays tax dollars to our local health department to protect public health, I with strong conviction must compel the board to deny the yearly landfill permit considering recent developments. The landfill just denied all reasonable and necessary conditions placed on the permit to protect public health. There's only one reason why anyone would refuse conditions to protect hazmat from entering our landfill. That reason should be obvious to each of you. What does the landfill have to lose in doing random inspections of rail cars? That has been part of the EPA recommended best management practices for decades. The landfill is required to use BMP, yet they continue to cut corners at our expense. The board is given local control over the permit and the inspections. We must use available funding to ensure public safety. That is reasonable and necessary. The landfill continues to claim that they have regulated with rules far more stringent than other landfills. That has yet to be explained and is likely related to the fact that we don't have a normal municipal solid waste landfill. We have 98% out of state by rail landfill that takes in 7,500 tons a day versus a few hundred tons in normal landfills. They are taking in specialty waste that includes toxic gypsum drywall, asbestos, industrial, residual toxic ash, and contaminated soil. They are under consent order, not the first time, because of serious mismanagement that led to years of human suffering. The problem didn't just go away, it's only shifted from one bad gas to another bad gas. Until the gas containment system is in place and working, there should be no permit allowed. The citizens deserve protection from this mismanaged company. The gas containment system should have been installed years ago. The only option to approve was with conditions. If they refuse all reasonable conditions, which are our legal right and duty to add, then the permit should be denied. To approve after 15 years of non-compliance substantial is dereliction of duty and puts the board at risk of lawsuits from the public and local homeowners. I would like to add after reading the proposed 2023 license conditions per the Seneca County General Health District compliance reporting, specifically states that Sunny Farm landfill shall comply with the July 26, 2019 partial consent order and final judgment entry in the Seneca County Common Pleas Court, case number 19 CV 0224 consent order, and provide the Seneca County Board of Health with copies of all submittals required by that consent order. A refusal of Sunny Farm landfill and following through with this order, which is basic and fundamental, is non-compliance. The board must not allow the permit. Destroying health for the sake of profit is a crime and should not be supported for gain of any kind. Thank you.
Next person on the list is Bob Hodak.
Thanks, Ed, and everyone here. I dropped off a piece of paper. I didn't want to take up my time to pass it out to all of you. It's this one. It's the drinking water source assessment for the city of Astoria. Who are we supposed to trust with our health and our future? Is it this board? Is it Director Goon? Is it President Loxton, President Wolf, Sunny Farms? Is it their spokesman that's here? I don't know. Is it Northwest Ohio EPA? Who are we supposed to trust? Well, there's one person I found that I feel like I can trust on this. Her name is Amy Clee. She's the Chief Division Officer for the Drinking and Groundwater. I spoke with her yesterday. She sent me an email today. Here's the problem with this 16-page report for Fostoria. The EPA went out there, they did a reassessment and revised this in 2019. And in this report that you all can get, it says that the major contamination that could happen to the groundwater, or to the water that's in the east branch of the Portage River, will come from farmers, a golf course, possibly 7 pipelines, accidents on the highway, and this east branch of the Portage River runs about from here to the Urban Woody stand in the green space across the street from the landfill. They didn't even see the landfill. It says specifically in their record. Also, the inventory is limited to what the Ohio EPA staff were able to observe on the day of the site visit. Now, I don't know how many of you have been here since 2019. Has anyone here seen the landfill since 2019 if you got within 2 miles of it?
Oh, yeah.
Evidently, the EPA staff couldn't find it. So, who do we trust? If they can't even see the landfill to do an assessment for the water of Fostoria, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble. I've spoken with some other people at the EPA. That's going to get corrected. We're going to get a reassessment. But I think we need to expect better from our taxpayers, our EPA. The people I feel sorry for here are actually the people that work at the landfill that have to deal with that stuff all the time. They say they're safe, but I don't know. There are no do-overs here. We don't get another chance. It's got to stop sometime. And this board can vote no. Now, I realize that there's probably a cost to that. But it's your duty to the citizens of Seneca County, the residents of Fostoria. And as for the dollars spent on Sunny Farms landfill gas containment system that's supposed to be up and running sometime this summer, I hope it is. I hope it works. Why don't we wait till after that to do this? There's no guarantees. So, I say no license until we see some compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person signed up to speak, Terry Love.
Hello, I'm Terry Love from Cushionville, Seneca County. Anyways, I look at it as I have a very low bar for government officials. I think that any decisions they make, if they impose a burden on people, that those people should be, the people that make the decisions should be willing to endure the exact same burden those people are. So I would ask you that if it were possible for a machine that would distribute the gases that are released from the landfill in your homes every day, all day, for your children, your grandchildren, would you feel safe? And these are mutagenic gases. And if you're familiar with that term,
I don't know if it's that microphone or not. I apologize.
Not that one.
it's the speaker.
It's not that mic. No, it's another microphone. I don't know which one.
Anyways, if such a device were possible to put in your homes and distribute the gases in the same amounts as they are released from the landfill.
Let me see. I apologize.
That's all right.
Okay. If I knew why I started, I would not let it do it, but I don't. I want you to be on mic.
Can you unplug that speaker potentially? Like that.
Well, if I do, you will not hear anything from any speaker or anybody.
It goes through the
There's that
floor.
over here, right?
Excuse me. If I do that and everybody speaks up, maybe okay. That's all we'll have to do.
Anyways.
No, it's all connected as a system, and it's supposed to be replaced next
Just talk
year.
up.
So, please speak up.
So,
Thank you.
would you, to ask yourselves, would you be willing to have something like that to distribute the gases that are released in your homes of you who do not live near the landfill at all and do not experience that, do not have that in the back of your mind? Is that gonna cause cancer in my child? Is that gonna cause cancer in my grandchild just from coming over to visit me? You need to think about these things, because this isn't right. You should be able to, willing and able to say, yes, I would do that because I believe this is safe. Just something to consider.
Thank you. Okay. Next person on the list to speak is Myra Spires.
Hi, I'm Myra Spires. I live on 108, 11607 West Township Road, 108. I'm going to repeat a story I shared at the last meeting, just for some of the people that weren't at the last meeting, and maybe a little bit more details. On November 30th, 2022 at 7:36, I had to call because we came home and we could smell the landfill as we were pulling up to our property. I called the complaint number with a 10 plus out of 10. The company that takes the readings of hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide came. The landfill odor entered my home through the evening as it was creeping through the cracks of my front door. I went to throw items in my recycle bin in the garage, and I got attacked by the offensive odor that must have got trapped inside when we pulled the car inside the garage. Not only creeping in my front door, it was coming in from the garage entrance. Ironically, the next day, we all had headaches. My son still has a cough that he has not got rid of, and we don't know what has caused it, what hasn't caused it. We're not saying it was a landfill. We're just saying if we got odors coming in our house and he's got a cough and it won't go away, I can't help but think it's the landfill. After calling Hunter at the health department, I found out there was one reading of 23.404 parts per billion and one reading 22.65 parts per billion. Last I heard, anything above 15 parts per billion is favorable for a violation. If the landfill is monitoring themselves and we are being gassed out in our own homes, who is keeping them accountable? Will the EPA hand out a violation from a reading that the landfill receives from their own equipment? Can you guys give violations from their readings? If not, why not have the health department do their own air testing when a complaint call is made and then issue a violation? 3 days later, on December 3rd, I had to call again because there were odors at my house, on my property. That day, there were no readings, but the air testing person reported there was an odor on site. I just wanted to say I do not support the renewal of the license, and I do not agree that they are in substantial compliance when I'm getting gassed out in my home still. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, Alan Wynandy.
Guess I'll stand on this side. Hello, Alan Wynandy. I live in Clinton Township, lifelong resident of Seneca County and Big Springs Township.
Speak louder, please, so people can hear.
You all have the duty and responsibility in the position in which you sit to look over and protect the health and well-being of each and every Seneca County resident. You have the responsibility and power to vote no on this matter until such time all legal obligations have been met. There are a multitude of reasons to vote no on the operating renewal, such as the continual odors that Myra just spoke of, that our entire area stretching clear to the northern boundaries of our county have to deal with. The monitoring equipment locations are not effective with recording the data they are intended to record. One's on the west side of the landfill, one's on the northwest side of the landfill. Why is this? Are we to simply settle for poor excuses on this? The debris that litters our entire western footprint There is not a day that goes by that debris coming into the landfill cannot be found along its journey. This ends up in our streams, our properties, along our roads. Why is it that we are forced to deal with this? Cultural studies. Have cultural studies been completed and/or have cultural artifacts been preserved and returned to native tribes when found, or have they simply ignored this? I strongly urge you to fulfill your responsibility and duty to this county and its residents and halt the operation of this facility until compliance can be met, then maintained if able to be met, and renewal shall be accompanied with stipulations of compliance, or the board shall have the ability to withdraw any permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Audrey Wynandy?
I'll pay.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Carl Walters?
Yes, my name's Carl Walters. I live on Arbor Street in Fostoria around the high school. I maybe have a little more unique perspective on the landfill in that the wife and I ride bicycles a lot, and a lot of times at night. You'll see us out riding at 12 o'clock midnight oftentimes. And it's surprising how many times when there's a moderate wind coming from the south, slightly from the east, where I have to go back home because my chest hurts. And obviously, it's not as bad in the house, and it's not like when it was hydrogen sulfide, where it just hit you over the head with a 2x4, but it's more like a feeling. It just creeps up on you. You get a tightness in your chest, and you have a hard time breathing. And I've lost count of times I've had to go home early because, and it's always when the wind's from that one direction. It's kind of like, strange coincidence. I think it was Mr. Podak, I believe, he made mention of the Portage River. That's a misnomer. The Maumee a river. The portage that goes through Fostoria is a ditch. The quantity of water that goes down there is infinitesimal. So like if you take a big river, somewhere I read where there's a large river out on the, which one was it? But anyway, it was out on the west coast, and there was radioactive waste leaking into that river. Well, if you put it into a river the size of the Maumee River and you pump it into water intakes and stuff like that, you're probably not going to kill anybody. If you pump it into a ditch that's got 1,000 gallons going down in a day or something like that, it concentrates the hell out of it. So we are more at risk than if we, like I say, if we were on the Maumee River or some big river. One thing I think people should think about too is I know the state of Ohio likes to keep their thumb on local boards of health. Like, you don't have to vote the way the state of Ohio, the people in Columbus want you to, but if you don't, they're apt to pull the rug out from under you. And I think I've seen them do that a few times. I think you probably have too. And but I don't think that should intimidate your vote. It's like, because you have Big Brother watching you, I think you still should vote what your conscience tells you to do. It makes you wonder why they haul trash 800, 1,200 miles, whatever, across the country to dump it in Ohio. Maybe it's because other states do a better job of protecting their residents than what we do, than what Ohio does. And in my mind, I would guarantee you this. If they put that albatross on the doorstep of Perrysburg, Sylvania, Delaware, the people in Columbus would say, fuck no, get that son of a bitch out of here. But we are expendable to the state of Ohio. Yeah. So you can vote as you wish, but I would not be intimidated by Big Brother in Columbus. And the gentleman from Sunny Farms, I think his first statement was, well, we've been in collaboration with the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency for 15 years. And that says it all. Yeah.
That was the last person signed up to speak. If you wish, go ahead. 3 minutes, please.
Sorry. Okay, so at Sunny Farm should at minimum have conditions on the permit. If there's nothing there to be guilty about, there should be no problem. They should be more than willing to go out and maybe do an extra few steps, precautionary steps, just to try to make right of everything they've done wrong for the last 25 years. This idea of substantial compliance, they've never been in compliance. They've been in substantial compliance with the consent order. The consent order has never been full compliance, and they've had a consent order for the last probably 20 years. So that means they haven't been in full compliance in over 20 years, and we've issued a permit every single year, and they've never been in compliance. Full compliance. We should not have to vote under duress. This board should not have to vote under duress like they did last year. How many times did they say, we vote yes under duress, but because the attorney says, well, they're more than likely going to take it to an appeals court, and you're probably going to lose. And so that satisfies everybody's intention of saying, well, we have to because the attorney says that we have to do it. Well, we're going to do it under duress to try to, tell you guys, well, we're trying, but not really trying. No means no, yes means yes, even under duress. That is why this board exists. And we should take it to the appeals committee. Who cares? Just because you think maybe someone says that it's not going to work, you shouldn't try. You owe it to us to try. Yeah. You owe it to us to try. The recent readings show that it's not working. Their systems aren't working. They're not capable of maintaining that facility. It just showed last week when the readings were so high. And what was it, the high wind maybe? But yeah, guess what? There is high winds. So every time there's a high wind, we all have to suffer. Like, that don't sit right. There should be no license until they're in full compliance. Not with the consent order, which means they are not in full compliance. And maybe it's an appropriate time to get a second opinion. New council, we got the same one. Why not try somebody else? We repeat the same things over and over. We know the process. I know the process. I know what's going to happen next, until you say no to take it to the appeals committee, which it's never been to before. That's what it's going to take. No means no. No more yes under duress. Thanks.
Can you state your name for the record?
Yep, Nate Heiser.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. There's no other names signed up to speak. Okay. Sure there isn't. Okay.
Can somebody else possibly speak that's not on the sheet?
You're allowed to, you just have to sign in.
Just sign in. I'll make sure. Yep. You get 3 minutes.
My name is Douglas Lear. Most of you people know me here. Do not live in Seneca County anymore. I live in Crawford County. I lived in Fostoria for many years. The coalition knows me well. I've tried to say things to this board. I tried to really hit the heart to this board. I had a daughter die of osteosarcoma. We lived out on 587. Osteosarcoma is a childhood disease, but a very, very extremely rare. Nobody knows why she got it, and I cannot blame a landfill for that either. But I do have to say, a major reason why I'm here today is reading the news over the past week about an earthquake. No one has mentioned it here. Nobody has said anything about getting a geologist out there to find out if this earthquake occurred for other reasons. We have aquifers that run lower. We have a fault line that we're not far away from. We have a gigantic freaking hill out there that has changed the whole structure of the earth around it. Now, from what I know about moving earth and creating such a big hill, we call what a burp in the soil. In other words, that hill could be creating an actual gas pocket to move. I don't know, I can't say for sure. It's my opinion. But if that gas pocket were moving, yes, it could cause an earthquake. Not an earthquake as we know from a fault line, but an earthquake in general. It doesn't even have to be a gas pocket. It could be the collapsing of something else, collapsing of an aquifer. We don't know what happened. None of you guys know what happened, do you?
No.
Well, you got a big, really big unexplained thing going on right now, and you're trying to vote on this. Hell of a timing. Hell, probably a good timing. My question to them, is their geologist been ordered to be out there to inspecting to see, to make sure nothing major happened with them before you even go making a vote like this? This is a major question. We are already close to a fault line. And you know, it took me from being over in Crawford County to read this going, holy crap, are these people really at risk now? Do you guys know if you got any cracked line? You're not gonna know. You're not gonna know until extra stepping up and well testing goes on and everything else. That was a big enough earthquake. You guys do have a big responsibility. Didn't even hear you guys mention it here. You were too busy telling we're in substantial compliance.
Okay.
But you didn't mention a darn thing about the earthquake if everything was safe. That was a pretty major deal. If I read about it in Crawford County and I think it's a major deal, I got friends and loved ones I left behind here. That's why I'm back today. Said my piece.
Thank you. Now it's time for board discussion. Before we do that though, thought we'd have a summary about where we're at.
Can we try and turn the speakers back on?
I'll try it.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so far so good. I don't know what made it start to hum, so. All right.
Okay, so a summary of some background and current status that I prepared for you. And you've heard most of this before, so it's not new information. So as far as background goes, Wind Waste Innovations, is the current owner of Sunny Farms Landfill. It's a municipal solid waste landfill located at 12500 West County Road 18 in Fostoria, operating under multiple permits issued by the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. The Board of Health does not issue permits.
Yeah, right.
That's a misnomer or a misunderstanding. Only the EPA can issue permits. The types of permits that are currently in place relate to a municipal solid waste facility permit, which addresses all aspects of operations, including the types of solid waste that can be accepted, including solid waste generated from the community, commercial and agricultural operations, and all other solid waste and exempt waste. For example, spent non-toxic foundry sand, non-toxic fly ash and bottom ash, and construction, demolition, and debris. And it is correct that the majority of the materials that come into Sunny Farms are construction and demolition debris. They are not municipal solid waste. That makes up a small percentage. There's also an air pollution control permits relating to the installation and operation of sources of air pollution, which has to deal with complying with the Federal Clean Air Act. And then National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permits, or what are known as NPDES permits, which address water pollution by regulating point sources that discharge pollutants to the waters of the United States, and therefore are looking at compliance with the Federal Clean Water Act. The Seneca County General Health District is an approved health district, which means that we are authorized by the Ohio EPA and responsible to them for issuing licenses to facilities, which is an annual operating license. It's totally separate from the permit. Performing inspections of facilities, which we do. We usually have a staff member there nearly every single week. All that's required is 4 times a year. And initiating enforcement actions against owners and operators failing to comply with Ohio's environmental rules. So the current status is Wind Waste Innovation, Sunny Farms Landfill, has been operating under the partial consent order and final judgment entry of case number 19-CV-0224 since July 2019. The Health District was not a party to that consent order. That consent order was between the Ohio EPA and Sunny Farms Landfill. And the reason for that was due to alleged violations in air pollution control and solid waste laws of the state of Ohio under revised codes chapter 3704, 3714, and 3734. No notices of violations have been issued against Sunny Farms Landfill in 2022 or 2021 by the Health District for non-compliance with state regulations or the consent order. The Ohio EPA has indicated via email that Sunny Farms Landfill is in substantial compliance, indicating that there are no outstanding violations or enforcements that would preclude the Board of Health from approving the 2023 license for Sunny Farms Landfill. The Health District staff and leadership concur with the conclusions of the EPA and the solid waste and legal consultants employed by the Health District that Wind Waste Innovations / Sunny Farms Landfill has no outstanding violations or enforcement in 2022 that would preclude issuance of the 2023 license. Possible 2023 license conditions were created with the assistance of our solid waste and legal consultants and shared with Sunny Farms Landfill, Ohio EPA, and the Seneca County Board of Health. And our legal counsel, Joe Durham, can address that further. But based upon the information we currently have and our inspection practices and observations over the last year, we do recommend board approval of the 2023 operating license, ideally with one or more of the proposed license conditions that were created with the assistance of our solid waste and legal consultants.
Any questions from the board members here about what we were just filled in on?
I mean, you have copies of the license conditions. They were not accurately summarized by some members of the public. We reviewed those last board meeting. If you want me to go through those again, I can. And you received Sunny Farms' response to that as well at that time.
My first question is, it says that, you said ideally with one or more of the proposed license conditions. My understanding is that they have denied that, correct?
Yes, but that's still up to the Board of Health if it wants to add license conditions. That's not a decision made by Sunny Farms.
Okay.
Yeah, Joe, could you give us an update on that, actually, about, we sent the conditions out and then did get a reply from Sunny Farms. Is there an update that you could provide on that?
Sure. Joe Durham with Eastman and Smith. The proposed license conditions were provided to the landfill. They could agree to them and they could come as with staff and propose to you as agreed upon conditions. They clearly don't have to do that. I have spoke to their counsel today. You have their response. They are not willing at this time to agree to any of those conditions. I will say based upon public comment, the fact that they're not willing to agree to those conditions is not a basis for denial. So I believe that really the board has three options tonight. One, to approve the license renewal, to approve the license renewal with conditions, or to issue a notice of intent to deny. We've heard my presentation to the board earlier this year. That hasn't changed. Without any notices of violation issued by either the health department or the Ohio EPA, and the indication that they're in substantial compliance, my advice to you is that it would be very difficult to defend if you are to issue a notice of intent to deny. Now, but that's a procedure as well. So you can't deny the license tonight. You have to give them notice, and they can request a hearing, and that procedure we played out in 2019. But really it is down to those three options for the board, and I'd be happy to answer questions on any of those options.
So if we say yes with the conditions and then they say no, we're not gonna adhere to those conditions, then they bring something back, or we have to decide then from there? What
So-
happens after that?
Yep, so if you would approve the license with conditions, whether it's part of the conditions that are, whatever conditions you impose, whether they're all of them as proposed or partial, they could then appeal the board's decision to the Environmental Review Appeals Commission, and have indicated to me that they will do that if you issue it with these conditions. And so that would go to it's another administrative appeal. And the question for that commission would be whether or not this board has acted lawfully and reasonably in imposing these conditions on top of the license. And so I believe that the consultants that the board has hired believes that these conditions as proposed are reasonable. We, I think, reached out, your staff reached out to Ohio EPA. Their legal counsel called me. At this point, the Ohio EPA would be unwilling to give an opinion as to whether or not they think those are lawful or reasonable. I will tell you that based upon my conversation with them, they questioned whether or not the board had the authority to impose these conditions. But I was involved in this to the extent that there's arguments that they're lawful and reasonable. I'm not going to tell you that we would prevail at the Environmental Review Appeals Commission. Depending on that decision, it could be appealed to a court of appeals. I just can't give you any likelihood of success, right? Whether or not they're going to uphold the conditions you impose as lawful and reasonable. But to the extent that you've hired consultants and they've looked at them and they've proposed them, the answer would be, that would be the defense, if there is an appeal.
I guess. I just feel like, it's not really a question, it's just a comment that I feel like there's lots of things being tossed around that I'm not a professional and I don't know the regulations, the violations, how they occur. It seems like there's a lot of things that should be violations, but they're not getting cited as violations. And we don't have our testing back. And so it's really hard to come forward and say, like, so this is a have to vote on tonight. I feel like I know like a quarter of the information, or we just haven't gotten a lot of things to make a comfortable vote, really.
Yeah.
One thing, sure. So, as the health commissioner indicated, we were not a party to the consent order with Ohio EPA and the landfill. In that consent order, they established this 15-part pavilion, right? It's not a regulation. And so, essentially,
What is regulation?
it's in the consent order. So, to the extent that, it then says in the consent order that one violation, or one exceedance, isn't a violation. It says that in the consent order. It then goes on to say that if during a 24-hour period, there are 3 readings above that, an average reading, that they have to notify the board. But they don't have to take 3 readings. So condition number 1, proposed by your consultants, is that not only do you incorporate the terms of the consent order into the issuance of the license, but then it goes a step further and says they have a duty to notify you immediately if they exceed 15 parts per billion. There will be a question as to whether or not that's lawful and reasonable, because you're adding a condition to a consent order that we're not a party to, and it's not the regulations. That'll be the legal battle in that instance.
Can I ask a question?
No, wait, please, out of order. Wait a second, thank you.
So,
Are you a lawyer for us or for them? Yeah. You sound like you're a lawyer for them.
Please, you can't, do not interrupt, please. We're trying to do the meeting, I'm trying to do it per Robert's Rules of Orders. Okay? I didn't do a good enough job last time, I'm trying to do it right this time, okay? Thank you.
So I believe the intent of condition number 1 is to provide the health department with the ability to potentially issue notices of violation when they're in violation of the consent order and or initial condition.
Do we have proof that, I've been hearing, not seeing anything official, but hearing through the grapevine that, that one of our employees went to do testing and was not allowed?
So we do a variety of testing out there. And so Austin went to do a certain type of testing, but it was beyond what we normally have done. Had some additional sites we wanted to collect water from that were in the wetland. And they were not comfortable with us having a sample collected from the wetland because they're required to protect the wetland. So, excuse me, it's not your time to speak. It's not your turn to speak. And so he brought that issue back. We each reached out. I said, who determines what a wetland is? And said, that's partly the EPA and partly the Army Corps of Engineers. But I said, let's reach out to EPA because they ultimately can say, yes, that is protected, or no, getting a water sample is not going to disturb the wetland. It's not going to disturb it. Those wetland requirements are in place to prevent construction, destruction of the wetland. That's not what a water sample would do. So they reached out to EPA, we reached out to EPA. EPA has said, yes, you can do that. And so we're simply waiting to get the right date that will work for the company that we're having do the water sampling for us. So we have it established, we're setting a date for that, and we'll be proceeding with that as planned.
What's the delay?
What's the delay for
getting a water sample?
For those particular ones? We're not doing the testing. You asked us to get in a different company. So we're stuck to, we have to work with their schedule of when it's their testing staff available to do the sampling.
What's the difference of Austin? Why was he able to do it prior? Was that, I apologize, I'm new, as you know. Was that something that was in place prior to a change?
Right, so we had certain sites that we always had water samples taken from. He wanted to get some from additional sites.
What I'm asking is why couldn't he go back?
Because he's not the one who collects the water sample. It is somebody from the lab to make sure it's collected properly. So that it's a valid site.
But he went the first time. Why was it different, is my question. Why was it different?
And a sampler always goes with him.
Okay,
So
you didn't say that.
So, sorry.
You didn't say
Yeah,
that.
so he's not collecting the sample personally, getting down there in the ditch. The sampler from the company that does the testing is the one who collects the sample. Right, yeah.
And they haven't been able to come back.
They haven't, it's not due to Sunny Farms, it's due to being able to get on the schedule of the company and
They haven't
us.
been able to provide somebody since then.
Right, we haven't gotten a date yet that works for everybody from the
Wasn't
counter.
the soil sample denied too? Didn't want to get.
He wanted to get sediment.
Yes.
Right, and so that's part of the same thing. He'll be able to go back and get that.
Is there an end to this consent order to where they would have to abide by standard Ohio regulations?
Well, to the extent that they need to come into compliance with this, and as you've heard, there's these dates that are coming forward with the gas extraction system, and it's going to come due. So then at that point, whether or not they're not going to terminate the consent order. They could, but to the extent that they would just have to maintain compliance.
So there's no end date on this. They can operate under this for however long they want to? We didn't put an end date, or the Ohio EPA didn't?
Yeah, so to the extent that I would
And
Right.
also, I
My
noticed that you
understanding normally
just
is that
said,
there are, yeah, that they remain in place until something happens.
Right. It does have dates for when the gas collection system has to be in place. Then there's additional deadlines for when it has to be fully operational.
and what are those
So-
dates? That's essentially what I'm sure.
I don't have those memorized, they're in there.
This
I mean,
one's-
basically, they won't be able to meet, the final date is as far out as December 2023, I believe. Because they've got a certain amount of time, one, to get it up and going, but then two, to be fully functional and operational, and to see if, are they able to meet those gas limitation requirements by those dates? So,
And this was started in 2019,
yes.
so for 2-3 years.
Yeah, it definitely is a multi-year, and it was designed as a multi-year consent order.
My understanding is the goal, the EPA's goal is to get them to be in compliance with the Clean Air Act. They may not be there now, because the consent order presides, but that's the end game, is to push it to where they're compliant.
But they adjusted all the other things under the consent order, not just the Clean Air additions. They want to get them under the Clean Air Act, but it seems like a lot of other things were also
Right, because it wasn't
expanded.
just violations of the clean air piece, there was also the odor. So that's a solid waste violation, not a Clean Air Act violation. So that's why the consent order is so lengthy, because it addresses multiple, details, that relate both to air and, water, municipal waste, what they take in, that kind of thing.
What do the inspections that Austin does look like when he goes out there? What is he looking at
It's,
for? How is
sure,
it
it's
reported?
we're required to use the EPA inspection form, because we're only doing this under their authority, so we have to use their specific, score sheet, basically, checklist based. So, sometimes he does focused ones where he's looking at one specific thing. Other times it might be the whole list of everything that's in there. It's a multi-page document, that's actually on their website, but, so it varies from one time to the next, what he's looking at specifically.
If an Ohio EPA person came out, would they be able to deny them the opportunity to take water samples or soil samples, or is his limitations different than the Ohio EPA people?
That's a great question, because I don't know that it's ever come up, quite honestly, because we're the ones delegated basically to do those pieces. So I don't know if they would have denied if EPA was there with us. I don't know.
I don't know if you can answer this, Ann. I'm confused about the accuracy of the allotment for the tonnage, because we had an expectation of being able to have so much space until a certain date, and then now we're out. It seems like everything's calculated down to a T on everything else, but that was so far off.
Right.
I don't quite understand that.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can totally answer that. Brian might actually be a better source of explanation of why they thought originally it would, last until 2030, and, now we don't know that it'll last till that. I can say they always start, so this license renewal has nothing at all to do with the expansion, nothing at all. It's not related to it at all. But anytime you have a change in a landfill, it can be a long process. And so for an expansion, a permit to install or a permit to modify, that can be a multi-year process, especially when you're looking at something as significant as what they're proposing. They haven't even made it through the whole EPA review process yet. So that's the first step of, going back and forth as far as, no, you need to, work on this detail of it. No, we're not happy with that part. That's a back and forth process that can last quite a while. So as far as the quantity goes, that could be in part, and this is me just having some conjecture, it could be a part change in the volume that they're bringing in, getting closer and closer to the daily max that they're allowed. Whereas originally, it was based upon some other number. Oh, well, we got it at 7,500, but maybe we think we're gonna bring in 5,000 tons daily. But as they've gotten more business, they get closer and closer to that 7,500 limit. So that would change the amount of space, the length of time. That's my assumption, that's probably what occurred. I don't know that. I mean,
Massive.
yeah, that's more of a landfill ownership
Well,
question.
the first time it was supposed to be maxed out in 2021, and I think they hit the max by 2015.
I wasn't here.
Okay, yeah, that's what happened before.
And now it's supposed to be 2031, and they're reaching close to it now, correct?
Why?
They're not there yet, but certainly in order to have things in place before you get to that deadline, they have to start the process now.
But what I'm
To
saying
request a
is
permit
they're
to install.
already almost to that max when it was supposed to be 2031. We should still have several years.
It just seems,
If it was based upon a smaller amount than what they're currently bringing in.
That's not true.
no.
Yeah, even in the expansion permit that they submitted, there was a number given what they want to go to. Don't hold me to the exact, but I think it's like 12,000. But in there, they said, but we really expect maybe 10 or so as an average. Sometimes we'll hit the 12, but then what they're getting at is like trying to say exactly what they bring in. They're averaging.
Is trash a violation? Like on people's properties, along the rails? Like, I don't know if that's a violation from anybody in
Not
itself.
typically by itself. I mean, there's times where, Austin tells them, you need to clean it up more. And they do have people out there all the time cleaning it up. But that's something more where, just like we work with a food service operation, on here's what you need to do. We give them an opportunity to, it's more education in part. So you're educating them on, here's what the requirements are. You need to have this fixed and cleaned up by this date. Or we'll have to come in and take more drastic action. It's the same way here. Austin says to them, you need to clean up that trash, and they clean up that trash. So it's not
But if
it's not a single time that it triggers a violation.
Or what about, like, if Austin is just going to Sunny Farms, but the surrounding properties? Like, I've gotten a number of emails over the past week, and even tonight seems to be a pretty consistent complaint about trash in their yards, along the property lines, throughout the fields. I've been hearing that, and I don't know if that is in itself, because if Austin's going to Sunny Farms landfill and telling them, like the surrounding properties, where does that fall?
I don't know to tell you.
I was gonna say, is that designated violation?
And how many
Littering.
times does he give them that education? I mean, they know they need to clean it up, right?
Well, no, they clean it up while he's still there.
But he shouldn't have to tell them that every month, right?
He doesn't necessarily tell them that every month.
I'm just more concerned about the surrounding properties. If we go there and tell them to clean up, they're gonna clean it up. Who's cleaning up all the other
Yeah, I don't know.
properties or watching to see if it's always there?
I mean, there are certain barriers that have to be in place to help prevent that. But obviously those barriers don't stop everything.
So one of the things that I've noticed is the topic came up with the comments about the transparency regarding matters at the landfill. And my first meeting here on this body, I heard a representative from the landfill talk about how they were transparent and open with things. And so it's very interesting that the public is having issues with the transparency coming from Sunny Farms. And then we hear that one of our own representatives or one of our own staff members tasked with getting the samples was denied, even though we would have jurisdiction over that area. It makes me question the transparency concerns that are being expressed by the public, by which we're being held to.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
I know there was.
I have a ton of questions. Maybe I'm just too new and this isn't like something I'm really well versed in, but like, where are the numbers for their readings, their water readings, their
We
air?
receive all of that and we review all of that.
And-
That's part of what Austin's job is.
Yeah.
But he's being denied.
No, that was a one-time thing. That, I mean, I think there's such great emphasis being
Can you
paid
just
on that
bring your
one
energy
time.
down a little?
Sure,
You're
yeah.
attacking
I'm just
me a
saying,
little
no,
bit.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean it
Okay.
that way. I'm just saying, it was something new. They didn't know he was gonna ask for it. Their job is also to say, well, this is protected wetlands. So they were also playing it cautious and saying, we don't know, can you be in protected wetlands or not?
So
We
can
thought
you
we
just
were
make a phone call
okay.
and say like, hey, is this okay? Like, we're just gonna scoop some water. Are we allowed to do that? No,
They
we'll
had-
deny it.
Right, no,
And then you have to come
they
back
did
2 months
immediately
later.
contact their people, and the decision was, no, we're not gonna allow it. So then that's why when we came back, we proceeded with contacting EPA and saying, you know, we think this
And
is
when-
a valid
When
thing.
was that? What was it?
This was all last
Roughly.
month.
How often has he checked the cover?
The,
The depth of the cover?
that's one of those pieces that's part of the inspection process.
But I mean, has Austin gone out and checked the cover to make sure
Yeah.
that, what is the minimum?
I don't have that memorized, to
Do
tell
we
you
have
the truth.
access to those?
Sure.
This checklist of information?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, the public record. Mhm.
And the public committee for the Sunny Farms has been getting some of that records, all the amount of leachate being treated, all the dumping, all the things like that going on, trying to fill them in on that information. So there is a lot of data that we do have,
Pages and
pages of it. And as far as the violations, it's always been frustrating to me also in that there is a consent order saying 15 parts per million limit, but even when there is a bump above it, the 23, 24, whatever, we're getting from the EPA is that, well, we need a trend. We need to
Well,
see
then
it.
why is that not a violation?
Well, but I'm just, wait a second. They say, is it a one-off issue, or is it gonna happen next week and the week after, and what? They wanna see a trend, that kind of thing going on. The problem I see with that is that by the time you have, quote, the trend they're trying to establish, now we're into a bigger problem, possibly.
Didn't we have an upsweep like with the last meeting where where the phone calls would came in? I mean, wouldn't that be considered a trend? Remember you showed the.
Oh, yeah, there was just been a trend going up as far as the numbers, but when you compare the numbers we have now compared to 2019,
Right.
it's way different as far as numbers overall, that's all. Many, many more complaints in 2019.
It's like, they don't have any violations, but that's not a violation, the trash is not a violation, they're not.
I would like to
Doesn't
understand,
have a lot of information to get, seems like monitors aren't in the right spot, I just, maybe, again, I'm new, I don't understand, but it just doesn't seem like it makes logical sense. It doesn't.
per the board's request though, we are adding 2 more gas meters. We are doing additional testing spots, including these sediments and things that we're now fighting to get in, make sure we can do it. That was requested by the board, so those are additional things, monitoring that we're trying to get in
That's
there.
already in place, not part of this.
Right, that's.
It's been
yeah.
recent.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Have we made any headway on it?
Right, so I got back a response, because I asked Chris to give me an estimate on the amount of time that would it take, because basically he outlined to implement that, there has to be a request for proposal or an invitation for bid that has to go out, which involves developing a scope of work, identifying the locations, confirming the modeling, the scheduling, and then there's the permitting process, because you have to have a building that it goes in. You have to have utilities hooked up to it, so working with the electric company, getting the easement, picking the locations, and then what's the how do we work the communications piece of it? Is it cellular or is it wired? Things like that. So I asked him for an estimate on the amount of time that it would take. He's saying that 4 to 6 months schedule would be aggressive before they would be up and running. The cost would be, and he's giving round numbers, about $30,000 just for the SO2 instrument, the auto calibration instrument, the data logger, the Cal gas, and then there's the power, the building, the fence, the possible slab to put it on, possible cameras, and then what kind of people do we need in support of this? So he's estimating that it would be a cost of about $30,000 to $35,000 a year to operate. But he's saying 4 to 6 months probably is an aggressive
Do we
schedule.
know what the optimum place or the optimum?
Well,
space from the landfill?
Yeah, I mean, so that's why they would go back to the air modeling that they've done before to determine where are those best locations. Yeah,
Who did the air modeling last time? 'Cause
Wes Younger did
Okay.
with Trinity
Are we
Consultants.
talking 2 miles or 5 miles?
We haven't talked specifically about that
I mean,
yet.
how far away?
Yeah, we haven't talked about that. I mean, he mentioned it in our call, but it didn't settle on a specific
All right,
amount.
thank you.
Yeah.
If there's anything to help out, we're happy to help.
I'll have one at my house if you guys need a place, just saying. I know exactly where to put it.
Okay.
I have a question about the air quality, what are the Jerome meters, is that right? So when the wind is too strong and there is a high reading, those just get put aside, or because I feel like we see some of those, but there was a high wind, so that just doesn't count?
So there's two different types. There's stationary ones and there's portable ones. And so there's requirements related to both, as far as when does a 15 part per billion have to be reported, and the averaging of them. And that's part of the reason why we wrote the first condition the way we did, because currently they don't have to report within 24 hours for one of the types, whereas they do for the other type. So we're trying to get more specificity on that, so that it's any reading over 15, not an average of 3 readings. So that's a piece of it. I think I missed the rest of your question.
I just didn't know if it counted, if because of the wind, does that just get thrown out, or it's like, because
Yeah, I don't know.
it's Northwest Ohio, like somebody said,
Well, yeah,
I
but
can't
I-
step
Like there's an
outside
excuse.
without getting blown away on a daily basis, so.
Yeah.
My understanding is that I think there's.
No, I said it always seems like there's an excuse for things not to count as a violation.
I just wasn't sure if that was a part of it, if the wind is significant, that reading won't
Right,
count.
yeah. So it's spelled out in the consent order as far as what they have to do, and you do have an average of 3 readings over 15 parts per billion. And basically, they do have to communicate back within a certain time frame, but with, what they think the cause is. I forget the word.
I mean, I see the cause, it'll say like this reading, but at what point I just don't know, at what point are those violations, am I asking that correctly? Okay.
What's the threshold?
Because we haven't had violations, but we've been seeing these things,
Right.
so I just wasn't understanding why some of these things weren't violations, and then we have no basis.
Well, because of the consent order language says a single off-site exceedance.
So it's all that fault.
Yep.
It's well spelled out.
It is not considered a violation of the regulation.
Okay, so per
So
the
they've given-
consent.
Per the consent order.
Or- And my understanding of the wind information
Mhm.
was that if you had a high reading here and the wind was from a direction other than from the landfill, then if it's coming from another spot, then most likely isn't that. You can't use that for every one of those readings, but that's what I was seeing on some of them. It's like it's coming from the wrong direction, so.
Right, so for example, hog farmer was spreading manure.
Right.
That resulted in high readings,
Okay.
but the
Yeah.
readings weren't from the
Yeah, it was
landfill.
one
You
event.
couldn't- Yeah, it was one single event,
That's
so.
something consistent.
That's what I'm getting at. So they consequently, it seems like they're watching is for there's 3 things happening, a consistent, and well, there's your trend. Well, by then, how far are we into the issue?
Right.
And how often are they testing if there's a high odor? I know she said it was like 3 or 4 days between them. Well, what happened in those 3 or 4 days? Nobody was there testing. It could have been 4 days in a row. We don't know.
Actually, their permanent ones test within every 5, 10, 15 minutes. I forget what the time frame is, but they're almost a continual kind of monitor. It's an
Are they
ongoing
like,
monitor.
do we get digital readings of that regularly, or is that something that they just have to document?
No, it's an electronic kind of system.
It goes to the EPA.
Yeah, it goes to
The
the
EPA
EPA.
gets it, yeah,
They monitor the air.
yeah, exactly.
I have a question for the council. Did Seneca County have any say in that consent order, putting that together?
We did not.
Is there a reason why?
So it resulted in, from the board's actions, issuing the notice of intent to deny, because at that time EPA was saying the same thing, go ahead and issue the license. This board did not, and so that notice was sent out, and the hearing was scheduled, and then this came out. So the EPA negotiated separately with the landfill and said they were going to enter into it, did not invite us to participate.
Wow.
Okay.
Can anything be
All right.
done about that to readdress that and foster, or Seneca County be required to be involved? How would that play out?
Unreal.
So we had discussed whether or not we could move to intervene as a party because you issue the license, and whether or not, that may be certainly be opposed by the landfill, I imagine, whether or not EPA would support something like that, so that you would have the authority, right? Not like we're trying to do here, to incorporate the terms of this consent order into the license conditions, but to actually enforce it in the court as well. But that is an option to consider. I don't know what the court would do with that, based upon, it does seem like you have you have the licensing authority of the entity that they're regulating in this consent order. So to me, there would be an argument to say that you could intervene. Now, it's
Do it.
2019, right? And we
Couldn't
would
even
be
find
coming
it
in
in
at
2019.
2023 asking to intervene in a court case. But we could explore that.
Yeah. All
But
right.
we have to vote.
Yeah, we need
So
to
how does that fall?
make a decision. How does what?
We
I'm sorry.
only get to do that if it's denied for this.
I would suggest you not make a decision on that, and you let me research that a little more. We've talked about that. But to the extent that, yeah, I mean, I believe it's an avenue to explore, but I don't know what the basis of that would be.
All right. Any other?
I know this was brought up in the comments, and I just wanted for the record for us and any members that didn't know about the earthquake on 12/22/2022. That was a 2.5 magnitude, and this is from the USGS at 8.6 kilometers depth at 41.109 degrees north, 83.445 degrees west, and that was 1 mile from Sunnyvale.
That was 1 mile.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. East, west, north, south, which way?
It was, I believe, to the east, or excuse me, to the west. To the west.
Right in my neck of the woods.
Yep.
Thanks.
West. That was per the report that was in the paper. So I marked down those coordinates and the
Unreal.
degrees and stuff.
Thank
so.
you, thank you. I was wondering how close.
Wow. Oh, that makes me sick. Makes me sick.
Any other discussion? Or questions? If not, is there a motion?
Need a motion and an intent to deny.
I'll second.
Call the roll.
So just to clarify, if we vote yes, are we voting to deny or no to deny?
We're voting for an intent to deny.
So we vote
Yes is a-
yes to deny it. Okay, just want to clear that.
Good
Try
question.
to-
All right. Okay, take a roll call.
Dr. Akers?
No.
Mr. Loxton?
Yes.
Mrs. Posey?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitt?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Dr. West?
Yes.
Dr. Wolf?
Yes.
Sure, did you want the roll call or the number?
Roll call.
Dr. Akers, no. Mr. Loxton, yes. Mrs. Posey, yes. Mrs. Vitt, yes. Mr. Watson, yes. Dr. West, yes. Dr. Wolf, yes.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, proposed format of the health director performance review.
Yeah, so I had brought this up at the last meeting about adopting a 360 evaluation for the health commissioner that would help to give feedback from the board, feedback from the staff, feedback from other stakeholders that would be involved in the Seneca County General Health District. And so there's different domains with each one. The president of the board would be in charge of administering this and putting this together. It would commence annually, beginning in January, and then we would hope to have the results, the self-evaluation, back for our February meeting, and we would have the February and March meeting to discuss those if necessary and use those evaluations to help the commissioner in her capacity to decide if there was any other action that need to be taken in regards to that. So.
Okay.
Did we ever get the paper for the last evaluation that she had or whatever?
I sent out to the board members the meetings from prior to the meetings in March and April, I believe, of last year, because we had a private executive session where we discussed.
I don't think there was like a formal.
It wasn't a formal form. There wasn't a formal form.
There is no formal.
There wasn't a formal form, and it was executive session where we all, as a board, discussed performance. And then came out of that, and then made a decision as to what to do. And part of that was, it was a motion made to increase her salary at that time, because we also reviewed salary compared to all the other counties, health commissioners and everybody else with similar size and staffing and that type of thing that they were dealing with. Although one thing that we're certainly, I consider us unique in is that we have a landfill to deal with. So that's one big difference. That's all it. So that was the performance review from last March when that was done. So, my comment on this was that there's electronics versions I've seen of this too that you can sign up for to do an evaluation. It might make it easier for it to be handled.
Yeah, and I think I put in there, you know, the domains that were included, we can put them in electronic format to give to the parties that let them know.
Yeah. Yeah, just trying to keep it, I mean, it's, you don't want just the president of the board to have to do everything, all of it, that's all. Okay. But this is a standard, different quality work, ability, dependability, cooperation, those types of things is what I've seen in other assessments. So. Any other discussion?
So I'd like to make a motion to adopt this as the policy for performing the evaluation of the health commissioner by this board.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a first and we have a second. Any other thing? Hearing none, guess we'll take a roll call.
Dr. Akers?
Yes.
Mr. Loxton?
Yes.
Mrs. Posey?
Yes.
Mrs. Vitt?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Dr. West?
Yes.
Dr. Wolf?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Motion passed. Appreciate that.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to enter an executive session for purposes of disciplinary action on a staff member.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can do that for a special meeting.
Well, I've got executive session if needed. He made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Yeah, first and a second. Okay.
Like a chamber room, we can.
I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, that's what the city council does, right?
We have a separate executive room. Yes, we do. Okay.
It'd be easier for us to come back.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's what we're doing. So anyways, so we have a motion and a second. Take a roll call, please.
Dr. Akers?
I'll abstain. I'm leaving.
Mr. Loxton?
No.
Mrs. Posey? Mrs. Vitt? Mr. Watson? Would you want to?
Yes or no?
Executive session, yes.
Dr. West? Yes. Dr. Wolf?
We're going to executive session, thank you.